Morning YouTube viewers and subscribers. As you can see, I've taken my Saito FA-100T off my Easy Stick and I put it on the stand. Now it's been about, I don't know, maybe a year since I've actually run this engine. So I figured it was time to actually take it out and run it, since I've been doing some other twin engine runs, or twin cylinder engine runs from a friend of mine. I wanted to go through a few things on how I actually set this thing up and tune it, because I've had some questions about, well, is it difficult to tune with a twin carb setup as opposed to a single carb? Because the FA-60T is a single carb, the 120T that I was just running, single carb. So Saito is known for pretty much making mostly twin carb engines. They did make a few single carbs, but this is a twin carb version. So that allows you a lot more adjustability when you have one cylinder that isn't quite right, or at least getting the cylinders matched. And it's been, like I said, a year since I've run this thing, so I have run this yesterday to try and refamiliarize myself with it. But what I do on this thing is that if the engine is broken in and it's been run, that's fine. You can just run it as is. But if you're starting out with a new engine, used engine, and you're not sure how to tune the thing, here's the procedure that I do. I'll actually close the needle valves, both of them fully, and then open each equal amounts, in theory, saying that they should both work equally well with the same needle setting. Now we know in reality that's not true, but that's a good starting point. So what I did yesterday was I closed these and I opened them 2.5 turns each. Now there are marks on the top of each needle. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily always line up exactly with each other, but if you note where they started, then it's not so bad. So what I did was I opened each up the same amount. I ran the engine, or I started up the engine, and as you know, it can be kind of challenging to hear the difference between one cylinder over the other. Sure, you can kind of watch some of the exhaust coming out, especially from idle to full throttle, but at full throttle it's a little tough to tell which one is running better than the other. Now this is where it's really important to have like a review, so that you know about what type of RPM, top RPM, you should be getting versus the prop size that you've got. And I do have a review on this engine, so I have a ballpark figure. Plus I've run this engine before with this prop anyway, so I already kind of knew that. So what I do is I start this engine up, get it up to operating temperature, and I'll go full throttle, and I'll check to see what my RPM, top RPM is like. And if it's a couple thousand less than what I think it should be, then obviously I'm too rich. So I just start tuning each needle, high-speed needle, the same amount until I get to a better sounding top RPM. And then you're like, okay, you'll go to idle and transition. Things may seem fine. If you idle it and you drop a cylinder out, then you know that that cylinder probably needs a little bit more tweaking. So as opposed to just trying to listen and figure out with your ear, I've actually used this, which is my non-contact thermometer with a laser pointer, because at least it tells me exactly where to look. Now this is not a scientific means at all, but it's one means that I use to help me understand which cylinder is running hotter than the other. Now for ease, it's obviously easier if I'm right back here behind the engine, so I can tell. I just have to choose a point, the same point on each cylinder. Whether it's the best place or not, I have to choose a point and just say, okay, that's the point I'm gonna read, and then compare the differences. Now I have tried doing it on the top of the head, which is the better position, but on this engine, then I have to keep running back and forth around this thing while it's running, and that's just really not ideal. It's a little bit better if I can actually just hold this at one spot and just do this, as opposed to trying to keep running back and forth and do this. So obviously this is the intake side, so it's going to be cooler anyway, so I don't know. I think I was going to maybe just shoot someplace in a consistent place and check that. Now obviously if one engine is, or one cylinder is considerably hotter, and I say considerably meaning 15 to 20 degrees hotter than the other, and you have a decent top RPM, maybe you should lean the cooler cylinder just a hair and watch to see what the top RPM does. If it starts to sag, then the hotter one was too hot. Now it's all based on what the temperature is too, I mean, and where you're shooting, so you kind of have to figure that out on your own. But I've got this thing set up. I'm going to do some runs. That's the methodology that I use to try to set this thing up. and get them tuned and balanced. This engine doesn't have a ton of runtime on it, and yesterday when I was running it, it didn't really want to keep an idle, so my air bleed screws may actually need to be adjusted also. And of course it's extremely humid. It's not hot, but it's extremely humid, and there's a lot of rain in the forecast, so that could also affect the low end adjustments. But that's the methodology I use, that I will use, and hopefully if the rain holds off, I'll follow this up or put a video of this on this video of this engine running and show you the results of what I've done. It's not going to be really very possible for me to actually show you in front of the camera the readings, but that's what we're going to do. Another thing I want to talk about on this engine is, so this is a single crank pin engine, single throw. It's unlike the Saito 60T, which is the offset or the boxer, true boxer style, which has a dual throw crank pin. So what I wanted to show you is how the firing order of this engine is, which I think is pretty interesting. So what I've done here, my prop is basically horizontal. And if you look, this engine fires left cylinder first, followed by the right cylinder. So here's what happens. Right now, at this point, I'm coming into compression on this engine. So I'm pulling it through compression. And right here at this point, now I'm coming into compression on this engine, or this cylinder. And I'm through compression here, so now we're going all the way another 360 degrees, actually a little bit more. I think the book says 540 degrees before you go to compression on this one again. Compression, 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 compression. So that's how this thing fires. It's rather odd. It creates a unique sound, but this information is important for me, especially because if I ever have to disassemble this engine, I need to know exactly when I should be feeling compression, because if I totally disassemble it, I need to be able to get the timing right. But that's a short, probably not really so short, video on how I tune this particular Saito 100 twin engine and the compression revolutions. So hope you learned something. I continue to learn something every time I run this engine, and I really hope the weather breaks so I can. Thank you.